I'm always asking myself if I'm happy being an architect. Often I think I should be a craftsman because I truly enjoy making things with my hands. As an architect, I can't build a house on my own. I need to give my drawings to carpenters and craftsmen. The moment I give my drawings away, I start to worry because I'm not participating in the process.
図面で相手が作っていくわけですから、その間に非常に空虚な気持ちが流れていくと。ですから常にその与えてしまった間が自分で物を作らないだけに非常に大きな不安を持ちます。僕は建築作るというのは基本的には戦いだ。戦いにその勝利がないと。
To make architecture is to make war. The only difference is that in architecture, there is no victory. Victory should satisfy you, but buildings rarely do. I've never been satisfied with what I've built. Progressing or regressing in one's development really depends on the subject. To be always standing on tiptoe, concentrating, ready to make an advance, are the lessons I learned from boxing, which I use in my work as well.
夢の中でクライアントと会って夢の中で設計をして
I'm always planning new projects before actually getting the commission. I often dream that I meet a client, design a project, and try to complete it, and then my dream ends, or suddenly being completed.
これがその初めてじゃなくて常にこういうものを作った方がいいとこういうものを作りたいということをいつも考えています。
When I saw this site, I was very happy and I felt privileged to be able to design a building for such a beautiful environment on the shores of Lake Shirakaba. I started to think about how to place my building in the landscape without destroying these beautiful trees, without destroying nature.
雨一本木のことはよかったな。あれ変えるのあれ映さんと。
そうやね。だいぶちょっと黄色くなってきてる。The difference between my architecture and Western architecture lies in the understanding of nature. We Japanese accept nature and live in harmony with it. Western people try to protect themselves from nature. In my mid-30s, I first began to think of the possibility of creating an international architecture that could only be conceived by someone Japanese.
その中でその一番こうイメージにあった初めから当初からイメージにあった水というものをどういうふうにこう配置すると
When I first saw this site, I was inspired to create a large body of water, which was the image I wanted.
かということを考えました。ここでは水の中に
By placing this cross and a body of flowing water, I wanted to express the idea of God as existing in one's heart and mind, rather than something that is merely presented to you by someone else.
考えられるようなスペースを作りたかった。自分がこの
I also wanted to create a space in which one can peacefully sit and meditate.
をまとめられるスペースを作ってやりたいというふうに考えました。今立ってま 刺すところの周辺に立ってる横の十字架っていうのは
The real cross is in the water.
十字架っていうのは水の中に入ってるのが十字架が正式なもので、ここにある十字架っていうのは実は
These 4 crosses are meant as sculpture.
標準的な意味の十字架の横の十字架は
They are duplicated at night by being reflected in sheets of glass that surround them.
すごいイリュージョンの世界を醸し出すだろうということを考えておりました。
People pass through this illusionary transitional space before entering the chapel.
というふうなことを考えております。カメラ持ってる？少しよ、もう今いいよ、あれで今。こっちですね。例えばこの単純な
To create a flat body of flowing water is not an easy task. Seemingly simple things, such as making water flow flat or making concrete smooth, are the most difficult qualities to achieve.
もっと滝のようにその
For instance, it is much easier to create a waterfall.
流せばそういうふうにできると。だけどこういうふうに非常にそのフラットのコンクリートも難しい。
An in-depth study of the characteristics and the behavior of such elements is necessary due to the limited number of material possibilities. Each work is a challenge to create a new space,
材料、そして限られ
rich in potential that no one has experienced
こ
before.
れだけ新しい空間、そして人々が体験したことのない新しいものが作れるかということに挑戦しているわけであります。
実際にはキリスト教は
As a Methodist minister, I am sorry to say that there aren't many people in this country who are seriously interested in Christianity.
実際に教会で信仰生活
Even though only 1% of the Japanese population is Christian, it has become very fashionable to be married in a church. The ritual is easy to understand and therefore accepted by those who decide to have their weddings there.
受け入れやすいという面はあると思います。ただしそれを自分の信仰として持っていこうとするかというと非常に大きな疑問があります。
そうなのかなって大切だね。
建築家自身が発見して驚くという。
そこがないとあかんでしょ。建築とかやっぱりああいう
You never really know what a building will look like until it is completed.
行きましょうか。科学技術が進んでその建築から
In our generation, scientific and technical advance is so significant, especially in the West, that architecture is almost totally conditioned by it.
僕は
In the next generation, I feel that the role of nature will become just as important.
その永遠性の高いものの中にその
Seen in this light, the idea of God and nature will become somewhat different.
ですから東洋の考え方が西洋の考え
I
方
believe that eventually Western and Eastern thinking will overlap and open to a new world.
ないかということを考えております。1960年の末に、
In the central section of Osaka, as in Kyoto and Tokyo, you can still find groups of tenement housing that have survived the war.
おりますから、必然的
The
に
Tomishima House of 1972, now my office, stands on the corner on the street of tenements.
あるとか木造のその建築を手当たりしたいそのアルバイトで、そのトレーニングを兼ねてやったと。その後に
After building furniture, interiors, and small houses, I opened my own office.
いわゆる日本のタウンハウスの角に一つ家があるから
A friend told me about a young couple named Tomishima who wanted someone to redesign their old tenement. This was my first commission.
最初の計画はこの小さいところに
Originally, I designed this house for 3, a couple and their child.
実は
The wife then became pregnant and had twins.
双子ができたんです。 で合計5人になってしまいました。
The house was too small for 5 people. So, as a joke, they said it was bad planning on the architect's part
彼らは
and asked me to take the responsibility.
話でその建物を譲ってもらうことになったのが最初です。その時に隣に40平方メートルぐらいの小さいところがあったわけですけれども、それも含めてその買い取りましてそこに増築しました。まずその富島邸というオフィスを
We subsequently bought this house and it became my office. Since then, we have changed the building many times. I like the idea of renovating my own office because it means I'm always testing my ideas.
の現場というものにいつもその身を置くことによってある意味で自分が自分の安心できるということで作っております。こっちというのがね。
Moose being a structuralist, he would focus on how the building would come together.
I never went to architecture.
Today, I'm going to discuss Tado Ando and his design philosophies. To start, here's some basic information and architectural background. Tado was first exposed and intrigued to architecture at a young age when he watched his own home being built. Unlike today's route of becoming a licensed architect, Tado would not attend a higher education and receive a master's degree. He would actually read and study as much as he could from Le Corbusier and Mies van der Rohe at the public library. Both Mies and Corbu both had their own specific design philosophies and had their own ideas at the time, and that made them famous. Off what Tado could gather from both of them, he would consider himself a minimalist architect and would try to tie Japanese culture into his design work as his career progressed. Tado was eventually awarded the Pritzker Prize in 1995. Next is the cultural influence in Japan. The widely used teachings of Zen would be a part of his philosophy and concept of his design over the course of his career. The origin of Zen comes from the Japanese school of Mahayana Buddhism, which would practice the skills of meditation and intuition. This would show how the Japanese people yield to nature and respect it as an overwhelming, unpredictable force. The state of calmness is achieved while using this tactic and is by the actions of intuition rather than the consciousness of Zen. What it is the appreciation of the nature cycle and the balance within it, and plays a role in modern Japanese design and architecture. The first architectural influence I would like to briefly acknowledge is Mies van der Rohe. Famous for his statement, "less is more," Mies became a common architect Tado would study in his philosophies. Mies being a structuralist, he would focus on how the building would come together. Using architectural design and principle of simplicity, he would find ways to show a seamless border between indoor and outdoor space. Mies's approach to design of space will also be broadly grouped into 4 evolutionary stages: enclosed space, continuous space, free plan, and universal space. Le Corbusier is next, and he was heavily studied by Tado Ando, and I could see how his work translated to Tado's later on. Corbu came up with the 5-point system. He advocated the pilotis, which is a gridded system that would eliminate load-bearing walls and form freer flowing plans, and helps portray a more flexible lifestyle. The use of the golden ratio in this work would help harmonize and proportion his designs.
To think about brutalism is to think about concrete. It's from béton brut, French for raw concrete. So what is brutalism? Brutalism wasn't a movement exactly, but it was a term applied to the architectural style of exposed rough concrete and large modernist block forms which started in the 1950s and flourished in the ensuing 20 years. It's a set of ideas that emerged after the Second World War. It's the exact opposite of the machine aesthetic championed by the early modernists. You can't straightforwardly do modernity anymore. You need something more human. The first brutalist building, the first one generally agreed as brutalist, is Le Corbusier's Unité d'Habitation. It's a huge concrete-framed, concrete facade, concrete structure. It has sillottes, which are columns which lift the whole structure off the ground, and it has an amazing sculptural roof. It's mainly flats, but with cafes and a school for residents too. It's not a pretty building, but it's an incredibly simple, powerful image. Anyone can draw it, having seen it for a few moments. Le Corbusier said that architecture was about establishing moving relationships with raw materials. In other words, brutalism is supposed to make you feel something. One of the most important people to write about brutalism is Rainer Banham. He got that brutalism was all about feeling. He wrote a long polemical essay in 1955 on the topic called The New Brutalism in the influential magazine The Architectural Review. Banham cited Le Corbusier on feeling at the start of his article. His essay says three things. First of all, it's about memorability as an image. Second, there's a clear exhibition of structure. And third, he writes that there is a valuation of material as found. You instantly get what a brutalist building looks like, you can see how it's made, and you can see what it's made of. All of these things added up to a kind of architecture which is really about feeling. It's about creating a felt impression primarily. So this is a very different way of looking at architecture from, say, the way Le Corbusier was thinking in the 1920s of a machine-like architecture. This is architecture to create feeling in the observer. This is Denis Lasdun's National Theatre, completed in 1976 after quite a protracted building process, and Prince Charles thought it looked like a nuclear power station. Of course it isn't a nuclear power station, but what Charles meant was that it was an industrial looking building, something that was rather bleak and uncompromising, something that didn't look like a theatre. But that was the point. And the point of that National Theatre and many of the other structures on London's South Bank is to create a kind of arts complex which is not like the rest of the world. An arts complex which is tough and uncompromising and maybe makes you feel a little bit unsettled, sort of taken slightly outside of the everyday world.